Alrighty, today what we're going to do here, I have got a motor that I need to replace. This motor is defective. I do believe we've got a gasket bad in it here. We got a hole in the case, something. I cannot get this bike to run. I've ruled out everything on, it's got compression, put a new carburetor on it, new magneto, coil. I've pulled the head, nothing there. Only thing I can figure out that the problem is inside the case here. We got an air leak. We're sucking air ends here, so I'm just going to go ahead and replace the motor entirely. I'm going to show you what we need to do here. Of course, I have my replacement motor here ready to go. Tools. I've got a small and a large flat blade here. I've got a Phillips. I've got two 10mm open-end combination wrenches. I've got a 14mm. I've got some adjustable wrenches. I have my spark plug wrench. I have a 1/4 inch ratchet with a 10mm socket. I have a 14mm 3/8 drive here on a bar. I have a pair of vice grips, linesman pliers, a pair of needle nose, and a pair of cutters. I have some blue thread locking compound here, and I have my impact driver, and of course I got my precision fine adjustment tool here. Okay, so you've got your new motor. First thing you're going to want to do on your new motor is go ahead and remove the sprocket cover here where the clutch arm is. Quite often they get these screws really tight, and that's what the impact driver is for. And what this does here is when you press on it, it turns. So you hit it with a hammer, it'll turn it counterclockwise, provided you have it set in that direction. You can change the direction by turning the whole assembly there. There we go here. Let's go ahead and get the rear mount loose. We have to take it off so we can mount it onto the bike. I know that I'm going to need the front mounting plate here for the U-bolt. Let's go ahead and remove the studs. I'm not going to be using these studs here, so I'm not too worried if I booger up the threads. You're going to put your lock washer near the head of the bolt, then your flat washer. That way the lock washer bites against the head of the bolt. That's plenty. When you mount your plate, you want to make sure that you get it centered here, that you have an even gap between the two. The flat washers get embedded into the exhaust gasket quite often. They tighten it up pretty good at the factory. You want to be sure and get them removed. It's kind of tricky to get them removed without gouging into the gasket. Check and make sure that your studs are pretty much down in there. You want to loosen up your chain tensioner. That'll let you get your chain on and off a lot easier. Pull the clip, pull the plate. If you can't get your spark plug tool in, I don't want to move that. It's got a 3/4 inch wrench, combination wrench. Remove the spark plug, that way you can turn the engine over easier. Now if your engine is seized, you're not going to be able to do that without removing the cover here, and you might even have to knock the sprocket off in order to get the chain off. But we're fortunate in that respect today. Loosen up the cable. Pull your cable out, save your spring. I'm going to back up the nut here on the carburetor. Loosen that. Get my carburetor out of the way. Let's go ahead and remove the muffler. If you go easy on the exhaust gasket, you can reuse it, but this one here is pretty much stuck on, so the exhaust gasket is trash. No worries, the new motor comes with a new gasket. I'll be sure and tie wrap the wires for the magneto to the frame and push it away from the exhaust here, from the muffler. That way the wires don't get burned. Sometimes you have to jiggle the studs apart in order to get your mounting cap, the plate, off. Pull the cable out, clutch cable out. You want to be careful not to get your clutch cable frayed here at all. That'll make it that much easier to put it back in if you don't get it frayed. And let's see here. And I do have power tools to remove this, but let's see if it's going to be easy enough today. Let's go ahead and get our new motor. Put it in place. So we're going to put our mounting plate on it, a flat washer, a lock washer, and then a hex nut. Okay, it's now at this point that you've got at least one nut on there. You can let go of it. Your motor is not going to fall off. So we're putting the flat washer on, then the lock washer. It's a lock washer you want against your fastener that you're tightening up. Okay, when you tighten this plate up here, you want to make sure that you have an even gap on this side here that you do as you do on the other side. I want to go ahead and get my front mount on. What I like to do is get both mounts on double check, make sure that I've got a good even connection here. You don't. Okay, with your motor mount, you want to make sure that you have your mount firmly against the seat tube. What you don't want is just the end of it. Like, let's say here's your seat tube. You don't want just the end of it on there. I'm exaggerating. You don't want a gap. You want it both the top and the bottom snugly against your seat tube. If you have just that one edge there, you're going to have a lot of stress all focused on one point here. That's why we want this here flat against the seat tube there. So you want to double check and make sure you've got that here. Now ideally we're going to have it flat against here, but you don't always get that. I would rather have just a little bit touching on the front than on the rear. If you're going to be running a higher performance motor, you're going to be souping it up. Well, number one, the Huffy Cranbrook is just the wrong bike for it. The metal is too thin for that sort of application, and your welds aren't the best. If you're just going to be putt-putting around 20 miles an hour or so, the Cranbrooks are fine. But if you're going to be going with a high performance setup, number one, Cranbrook is not the bike frame for it. Your standard box store bikes are just not suited for it, nor are the using the kit mounts. You want to go ahead and spend some money and get a good machined mount for both the seat tube and your front and your down tube here. It's just too much stress all focused on one area. They can be prone to some vibration, so you've been warned there. Okay, if you want to put some thread locking compound on it, now would be a great time to do it. I've just got this hand tight here for now on the front. Let's put us some, let's back these off just a little bit. We've got thread locking compound on both the front and the back mount. You want to get these hex nuts here firm and tight. You don't want to get it too tight. This is still somewhat of a fine thread and a small fastener, and they're not the highest grade fasteners out there. Alright, so I've got it just a little bit snug here on the back. Let's go ahead and start snugging up the front. Okay, you want to make sure that your motor is straight up and down, that it's not, I've got it pulled out here. I'm pushing it in here. I'm checking. I can tell that my motor is straight up and down. Because if you get your motor cocked out, it's going to have problems with your chain. So you want to make sure that that your motor is straight up and down as well. If it's cocked out, you're going to be putting stress on your fasteners here. You're not going to have a good connection there. Setting your motor up properly and having it mounted properly is your first job in a correct installation here. If you have it cockeyed here, cocked somewhat, you're going to have failure. If you don't have a good solid connection here and have it properly tightened up here, you're going to have your studs flex. They will break. As well, if you don't have a good firm seating here, you're going to have things off kilter here, and it's prone to breaking. So you get this set up right at the first, you're going to have a lot better time, a more reliable installation here. I got my fasteners good and snug here. That is on. It doesn't rock. It looks straight up and down, and with relation to your seat tube, we're good to go. So now we need to get the chain put on. I'm just going to lay the chain on the sprocket. Get my spark plug tool. I have the spark plug out. That way I don't have to fight the compression. Okay, as this link here, as your chain here gets close to the case, I put a fingernail on it. Be careful you don't get your finger crushed in there. And I had to guide the chain, keep the chain from striking this here. If you have the chain laying down, it'll strike that and you won't be able to get it to turn. Hold your chain up. And I got it about to the tire. That should be fine. Sometimes you'll find the sprocket right out of the box. In the factory, they didn't deburr it. They didn't clean it up. Sometimes what you'll have to do is get a file and go on each of these teeth and file the edges and file the tips here to a little bit of a point. Clean it up. That way it'll fit the chain properly. We're going to put our connecting link in. We want to turn the wheel somewhat to take out any of the slack. Alright, I've got my chain on the sprocket good here. Got my connecting link in. Here, put the plate on. Okay, the bottom of the chain, the direction of travel on the bottom of the chain is from the motor to the sprocket. You want the closed end of your locking clip here to be in the direction of travel. So if it's on the bottom, it's going to be pointing towards the sprocket, the rear sprocket, and if it's on the top, it's going to be pointing towards the motor. So we've got it on the bottom, so we will have it pointing towards the rear sprocket. Alright, here's a good chance to catch a finger and get a nice blood blister going. Okay, you want to check your locking piece here. Make sure you've got a good bite and you're in the groove. There, it's not that you need to do it hard, you just need to get it seated correctly. Okay, Motorized Bicycle Safety 101. This idler adjuster here, this chain tensioner here, is potentially dangerous. If you do not have it firmly attached to your lower frame member here, this is called the chain stay, this is called the seat stay. If you do not have it firmly attached to your chain stay, in operation, this could go into the wheel, catch in your spokes, and you are going to have a bad time. You're going to wreck your pretty little motorized bike. So, we've got to make damn good and sure that that doesn't happen. I make sure that I get this in very tight, and I still want a gap in here. If this top plate here and the other piece here are completely touched, that means that you can't get it any tighter, and there's a chance that it can be loose. So I've got my 14mm wrench. We've got it reasonably snug here. I'm going to give it a little tap. It's pretty close to closed there. Pretty close to closed there. Still have a gap. It is tight, and I can tell that this chain is pushed in here, so I'm going to need to push the chain adjuster out some. Let's see what we got there. Okay, looking at the bike and the stand, the bike is leaning this way somewhat here, but I can tell that I've got the top chain here is directly over the bottom chain. They're not misaligned here. That's going to be a big problem here if it's not aligned correctly. It looks like the bottom, like the chain is feeding well onto the sprocket. I'm not hearing any popping. It's not trying to walk off. I think I need to give this just a little bit of a love tap in. We're doing good there. We've got good tension on the chain. The motor is turning over good. It's not making any noise. Okay, now we need to get the clutch cable on. I like to get my clutch cable on before I put the carburetor on. push the cable end into the holder here, get my spring to where it's just beyond the cylinder there. Use my channel locks. I want to give this just a little bit of a turn. It's a little bit hard to put the cable in if I have this turned the way I like it here. I turn it this way here to lessen the angle where it's going to mount on the clutch arm. If I have it turned more this way here, with this facing a little bit more backwards, it'll be there. The cable will have to come back around too much, and it'll put too much of a bind on the cable here. Okay, let's put our sprocket cover on. I do not run the drive chain guard. I don't really see it as necessary. Not like I'm going to be wearing a damn scarf, and you wouldn't want to wear one on a motorcycle anyways, or a motorized bike. If you don't want to put this long screw in, and you save one of your 2 screws that go here in the front of the sprocket cover, you can use that one, because the reason for this one being longer is the chain guard would bolt onto this piece here. This isn't absolutely necessary, but you know what? I put them on anyways. See, this is where you want to make good and sure that you don't get any frayed bits here, and you don't want to cut this in any installation here, because if you cut it, it gets frayed, and you're going to have a hell of a time trying to get it back in if you ever remove it for service. For a one-person operation, getting this on is a little bit tricky. What I do is I get my Phillips in my back pocket. I take a pair of needle nose, I put it over the cable, and I take another pair of pliers here, and I pull. Make sure that you have your cable fully into your lever, that your adjuster on your lever is fully screwed in. Your cable is firmly seated in there. Now we're going to pull on the cable. I've got that good and tight. I'm maintaining a good grip here. Now I use my screwdriver to tighten it up. You want to get it good and snug. That's good and snug. Now I'll show you a little trick what you can do. I take the cable and bend it forward. Not too much, because you don't want to fray it. Bend it forward. Put it here on the inside and have that part rest against the cylinder head. Some people will go ahead and tie wrap it here. But to me, if I leave it there, that's good. You can do either one. But like I said, don't go cutting it, because if it's just flopping in the wind here, you'll get annoyed with it hitting your leg. So I just put that in there like that. Let's get our carburetor on. You want to make good and sure. Okay, you see these slots here in your carburetor? If you don't have your intake pushed in beyond those slots, you'll be sucking air and you'll have an air leak. And your motor will not run properly, if run at all. So be sure and push your carburetor on all the way. Back up the nut here, make sure it's pushed on all the way. Get it a little snug, make sure your carburetor is straight up and down. Tighten up the screw, we got a carburetor on. Let's go ahead and blue to blue. Black to black. And the white wire I'm going to just go ahead and trim. I'm going to slide back the insulative cover, cut it. What I'll do, I'll take my wires here and I'll put it on the other side of the U-bolt here to route it, keep it away from where my exhaust, the muffler, is going to be. Put a tie wrap on it. Make sure it's out of harm's way. Make sure that your insulators are covering the connectors. And trim the excess. All right, got our muffler here. We have some leftover bits from the exhaust gasket. Scrape it off. I can feel that there's no bumps left. What little bit might be left is fine. Hold the muffler in position, get your flat washer on. Get the lock washer on. And we want to start one of the tall hex nuts. Now I've got my gasket on. You want to make sure you got your gasket on. You don't want to do this without it. Flat washer goes against the exhaust, then your lock washer. Is that way your lock washer will be up against your fastener. Get the tall hex nut on. A little bit of thread locking compound. And get the two tight against each other. You don't want to turn this one here and make it any tighter or any looser, otherwise you're kind of defeating the purpose. Maybe just a little tighter might work, but if you get it too tight, you can strip things out. So you want to get your first one on there good and snug, back it up to where it doesn't turn, then tighten the second nut on, and you should be good to go. Okay, we need to get our spark plug in. Then we're going to do a checklist. Make sure everything is good and snug and properly put on. Before we go, I can reuse the old spark plug. Make good and sure that you don't have any dirt, metal shavings, anything on this here when you put it in. Be careful that you thread your spark plug in correctly. This is nothing you want to force. This aluminum head here, you can strip real easy. I've got that in snug. If you have the hard plastic spark plug boot, you need to remove the end of your spark plug. Otherwise you will have problems. So I got my spark plug in hand tight. I don't have enough room to get my spark plug tool in there. And I get it tight by hand. And this is a long wrench here. I'm not going to put much force on it. I've got it seated. I've got it snug. After hand tight, I don't go any more than a half a turn. Watch your spark plug as you start to break in your motor and get things warmed up and going. After it cools off, check it, make sure it's snug. After your first ride, you want to get a 14 millimeter wrench. Most of your acorn nuts here on your head are 14 millimeter. After your first ride, you want to go back once it's cooled down and just double check that these are equally tight. You don't want to get them real super tight. If you have a torque wrench, you want to get it torqued down to spec. You want to do that after your first or second ride. Or just use a wrench and make sure it's fairly snug, not too tight. But if they come loose, that's where you're going to have a problem, and your bike will run poorly. All right, so we've got our spark plug boot on. We've got our muffler exhaust on. Good. We have the electrical connections put in correctly, blue to blue, black to black. I've got it tie wrapped out of the way. I have my motor mount on. It's good and snug. Carburetor is tightened up. We have the clutch cable in properly set up. I've got the rear motor mount snug. Everything looks good there. Our chain is tight. Our chain tensioner is adjusted. Pull in on the clutch. Now this is a new motor. You have to kind of break the clutch loose. There we go. It's turning a little bit here. I'm confident we're good there. Let's go ahead and crank this baby up and get on the road. It's rolling good. It might even hang up again a time or two. Let's just go ahead and get it to the road here. Sometimes what I'll do, I'll just get the bike going and we're good to go. Okay, we've got gas on. I've got gas into the carburetor. We're going to prime it. Push down on the primer button here. About maybe 4, 5, 6 pumps. Put the choke up into the starting position. We're going to pedal it to 5 miles an hour. Keep pedaling until the motor starts. I'm going to pop the clutch. Give it a little gas. While I'm still pedaling, it'll pop and sputter. I'm going to push the choke down into the run position. Continue to pedal. Slowly give it gas till the motor takes off and goes. Okay, after our first ride, you want to go through. I didn't stop the bike after a little bit to check my chain, because I've been doing this a while. My chain is in good shape, but you want to be sure and check your chain. Make sure you not have any problems with it binding or anything here. Check your chain, your idler adjuster here. Make good and sure that it has not moved. You do not ever want to have this move. We know that. That's very important. So we're good there. After your first ride or two, you're going to want to go through and make sure that your muffler nuts are snug. You don't want to crank them any tighter, but just make sure that they're snug. There's also a nut here on the bottom of your mufflers. You want to check that. Make sure that doesn't come loose. We've got our mount here. Make sure that that's snug. Make sure that your intake doesn't vibrate loose. Make sure that your motor mount does not vibrate loose. And avoid cars. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. Click subscribe. You're looking to buy a new motor or motor kit? Check the link down below. Thanks for watching.